Welcome everybody back to an episode of Views from the Grand East. We have a special episode this time because we're not speaking to anyone from the elected line. We are speaking with Right Worshipful Eli Berkowitz, Grand Photographer, 2 years, in a row. But we're going to be talking about your first year as Grand Photographer. I got to work with Eli. I was on staff as a Grand Chaplain, but I was on the photo committee that he was heading up, and unfortunately he had an accident. And we're here to talk about that accident and how Free Mainstream was a part of that in a good way. So Eli, why don't you tell us about the accident? Give us some details of what happened.
Well, on August 24th, 2023, I had been working at the time for Frito-Lay. I had been at a location in Philly on 20th Street in South and bouncing off the potato chips on a hand truck, bouncing them off the back. The hand truck grabbed my pants leg and pulled me onto the ground, hitting my head, falling on my side, and a bunch of other different things. Lying on the ground for about 15 minutes, watching people walk by, nobody doing anything about it. I had asked one of the people there to go in and call the Wawa manager, who came out, and I asked them to call 911. And then I fell out of consciousness again. The ambulance arrived, and haphazardly, they had asked me where I want to go, and not thinking, about any place else, I said I want to go to Penn Presbyterian. At that point already, I had actually called my manager on a different phone and told him what happened. And I believe he had called my wife and told my wife that I had an accident, and they were taking me to Penn Presbyterian. And by the time she got there at Penn Presbyterian, I was totally out of it. I went unconscious, and they had told her that I had a fractured skull, 9 broken ribs, back in my kidney, and they were talking to her about different procedures that they wanted to do. And me not being awake, hearing about it later on, they were asking her about different things and mentioning to her that I might not make it. I believe at that point she had contacted, one of my good friends, Right RW Rodney Butcher, who I believe came, almost immediately, as soon as, she had got in contact with her. And then basically after that, being in a coma for 40 days, 45 days, most of it, she'll have to tell you more about what happened after that.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't around for it.
You weren't around for that part.
I was around, but not around for it. Yeah,
you were on vacation for a little bit.
Mental vacation.
Mental vacation. Yeah, I mean, before we started, I got to speak with you a little bit, with Barbra a little bit, also with Rodney, who's here. They're both here, and we'll get to talk to them shortly. Barbra had mentioned it was about 85 days total that you were in the hospital before you got out.
Yeah, I was in Penn Hospital, Penn Presbyterian, 85 days. Wow. And then they transferred me over to Kessler Rehab. And I was in Kessler Rehab for 9 weeks. The doctors at Penn Presbyterian had told Barbra that I will never walk again, I'll never talk again, and they weren't even sure if I was even going to make it.
Yeah.
And she fought with them, Rodney fought with them. I said, no, he's going to make it.
Yeah.
So
that's a lot. I mean, to go from life or death now to, all right, you're here, but like now you might not walk again.
Yeah, so part of it, as my wife explained to me at a certain point, part of getting into Kessler Rehab from Penn is that I needed to be able to walk 5 feet, and I couldn't walk.
Wow. So
the PT people there, the first time they came up, they propped me on large crutches and took a video of me walking 5 feet. And my wife is in the healthcare business, and she knew a lot of people at Kessler Rehab, which is one of the finest rehabs in South Jersey.
Shout out to Kessler Rehab then. Good job.
Yeah. And she got me into Kessler, but they had to get me through certain things to be able to get into Kessler. The people at Kessler Rehab were just wonderful, wonderful. They got me up walking, along with Barbra. When I told them there, I had Olivia, was my PT there. And she said, you're going to do this. You're going to walk around the gym. I said, I can't do it. And she said, no, you are going to do it. You can do it and you are going to do it. And I said, I can't. You are going to do it and you're going to do it right now. So, I had the walker at the time. I was still in a wheelchair and walker. And she walked me over to the middle of the rehab, the thing. And she goes, you're going to walk around the rehab without the walker. I said, I can. She goes, well, guess what? She said, I'm taking the walker away from you. And you're standing there. So either you stand there for the rest of the day, or you walk.
And do the steps.
Yeah. And God bless them. They pushed me. Barbra pushed me. And,
Well, I saw you walk in today. And I've seen you walking at a few events with your camera and everything. So you're definitely walking.
I'm walking almost back to normal.
Good.
Almost. A little bit of a limp, but almost back to normal. And it was all part of, that journey. And part of, people like Rodney, Ken, and Frank that were constantly there and saying, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. So, they say I'm a miracle man, but that's not true. They all are. The whole group is all part of a miracle.
Support.
Yeah,
agreed.
They're all part of it.
Great. Now, we got Rodney here, and so I want to say the names officially. So we had, because Barbra had mentioned 3 people in particular that were anchors, and that was Right Worshipful Rodney Butcher, Right Worshipful Ken Thomas, and Right Worshipful Frank Jones. Am I correct with that?
Yes,
those
100%.
names? And so these guys were there. And so we're going to get to talk with Rodney in a second, and then we're going to talk with Barbra. And before I go into speaking with them here, now that you're here on the other end of this, right? And what we're here to talk for the brethren to see is how Freemasonry was there for you. So let's elaborate there. Now we know the accident. We know kind of, what the time frame of what it has been. We know that, you had mentioned Rodney's other brothers in there. So how were they there for you? How were they stepping up?
They came. They gave me support. There are certain times where the lodges in my district mainly, there were other lodges that called Barbra. Do you need help? What do you need? Andy Cherney from Grand Lodge, I think he called her 2 or 3 times. Do you need any bills paid? We didn't need it, but it was just a thought behind it.
Yeah, they called.
And just the fact that they were thinking about us, they were making sure that we were okay. Through it. And the brothers that came to visit once I was in a better position, going home after being at Kessler for 9 weeks, I had an infection. I was on IV at home. I had 24-hour nursing at home for 7 months, I believe, right? And my nurses that came in and saw all the brothers that were coming in on a constant flow of risk, they said, this is an unbelievable organization that supports. They don't get paid for it. They're just there for you when they need you.
Yeah,
that's
what's amazing.
Yeah. And that's all part of, being part of this fraternity and being a brother, And the most important honor that you can have is give back. And that's an honor when somebody can give back, to what you do, help somebody else.
So we know that there's about 40 days, 45 days or something. You said you were in a coma, right? So we're going to get those details of those days. From Barbra and Rodney who are here.
Yeah.
But you brought up a couple things that I want to touch base on, and that was, one, that they didn't think you were going to make it, right? And eventually that you weren't going to walk. Now, for the parts that you were conscious for, that you were back out of the coma and stuff like that, let's talk about the walking. Did you feel that you weren't going to walk? Was there doubt in your mind that wasn't going to happen?
There were times where I felt that I was. Barbra would come in, and she was working at the time. So she'd come in, maybe in the late afternoon, or if she had the day off, she would come in, for the day. And she said, stop this nonsense. You're going to walk, and you're going to get better. And you might not be 100%, but you'll be at least 85%.
Something.
You'll be at least at 85%. I had a whiteboard. So when I was talking, I wasn't talking, so I was writing everything down on a whiteboard.
Yeah.
And
you had been trached, right?
I had a ventilator in ICU,
Yeah.
and then they switched me to a trach.
Yeah.
And they took the trach with me to Kessler Rehab.
Okay.
and they took care of it there. And the trach came home with me,
Okay.
and I had the trach. I think I had the trach. I would say, I mean, Barbara knows much better than me. Almost 8 months
Wow.
with a trach.
Yeah.
And then when it was time to come out, she was there. The guys were there, and when the trach came out, and even Grandmaster at the time, Len Vanderhorn, I was going in to be grand photographer, and he wouldn't pull because couldn't do it. He wouldn't pull deposition from me. As a matter of fact, him, a few other guys, Rodney, a few other brothers, including Barbara, came to Kessler Rehab and gave me my gold collar there, me sitting in a wheelchair with a trach and all that.
Yeah.
And the first thing I heard Len say when he greeted me, he says, "When are you going to get that thing out?" Which I said, you know what, that inspired me to,
Yeah, you made it around towards the end of the year. I remember, finally
Yeah,
seeing you out.
the last quarter of the year, I started coming around a little bit and
Yeah.
started getting groove. But you know what? I had a good team of people, including yourself, and I'm not meaning to do that.
Yeah.
That took over what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, we all stepped up for you.
We all stepped up, and they all took care of what needed to be
Yeah.
done. And when I started coming back into consciousness about what needed to be done, they constantly call me and say, "Hey, we're doing this, and we're taking care of this," and follow up, and they took care of me on the professional end also. So
Good.
it was good.
And this year you get to actually do it for real now.
Participate on everything.
Yeah, because I know Moshe from Margroff, he had reached out to me, told me he was thinking about putting you back, and I was like, that's fantastic, so that you can really get the year.
Yeah.
And from before you got injured and you running it, putting it all together, like you really had a good grasp of how to run the team, what we were going to do. And so this year I know I'm getting to witness you do it from front to back now.
Yeah. I had everything done before my accident, and then I did it this year, and everybody knows where they're going and what they're doing, and I have a good bunch of people on my team.
Right.
Very devoted to the craft and very devoted to the photography team.
Yeah.
Which is good.
All right, so let's move on to speaking with Barbra, your wife, and we'll get some of details. So Barbra, thank you for coming to sit with me, with us, for the brethren to get to know you and the story about what happened with Eli. So you were sitting on the side while we were talking about it. Eli was breaking down some of what happened, but we have days that he can't recollect because obviously he was in a coma. So for the days that he was in a coma, let's start from the beginning. When you got the call, like about what happened, what was going on, what were you thinking?
Well, when I got the call, I actually got the call from a nurse at the hospital. And so I went, but the nurse described it as he fell, and we think he might have broke his shoulder or his
very
collarbone.
nonchalant, right?
Very nonchalant.
Yeah.
And I thought, I went to the hospital right away, and when I got there, their chaplain came out. I didn't know she was a chaplain, but she's visiting people or whatever. And I said, "Oh, can I go and see my husband?" She's like, "Well, he's they're checking him out, making sure he's okay, and I'll come back out and tell you." So this went on for like 2 or 3 hours, and then I said to her, "What's going on?" And she said, "Well, now they're doing an MRI." And being in healthcare, I knew an MRI was a serious
that's
test.
not a little bump and bruise now.
No, why are they doing an MRI? And I said, "Why are they doing an MRI?" She said, "Well, I'll be back out." So she kept kind of putting me off. And then finally she came out and said, "I'm going to take it back to Sam." And as we were walking back, she said, "Now, I don't want you to get upset, but he is in trauma, and we're going to have to send him to the trauma unit, ICU."
Oh, so this escalated right away from there.
It was, in my opinion, it was always escalated. She just didn't want to tell me.
She didn't deliver it that way.
She didn't deliver it that way.
Okay.
So I went back, and then the doctors were there, several around him, and said he's seriously critically injured. Like he had a fractured. They were very concerned he had a fractured skull and a concussion and a brain bleed. And he had 9 ribs so severely broken that they were going to have to do rib plating surgery because the pain was so intense and they were broken so badly. and he had a bruised kidney. All this was on one side, and a broken scapula. So they took him up to ICU, and the surgeon, this was on a Thursday, and the surgeon said, we need to do surgery tomorrow morning on these, rib plating. He said, now, once we do the surgery on the rib plating, we're going to put him on a vent for a couple days, and then he'll come off the vent, and we'll get him to breathe and slowly get him back, and he'll be fine. He said, and he has a broken scapula, but he said, we'll see how the fractured skull will. Thank God there was no cognitive issues. His concussion was fine. The brain bleed dissipated on its own. However, after the surgery, 2 days later, when they tried to take him off the oxygen, they said to me the pain was so intense that they could not get him off the vent because of the pain. So that led to a coma. Well, when you're in a hospital...
That was an induced coma?
No.
It just happened?
He just was in a coma.
Oh, wow, okay.
And that leads to a lot of things. He ended up with a stage 4 bed sore on his sacrum, down to his spine. That's when he came home, and he had a PICC line with an IV for 6 weeks. It was for the strongest antibiotic you can possibly take for a bone infection.
Okay.
He ended up having blood clots in his lungs and his leg, not because he ever had them before, but because the accident, laying in bed, he had blood in his chest. They had to do several bronchostomies. He had several infections.
It's like the healing was worse than the accident.
MRSA, it was.
Yeah.
And so many days they were trying to figure out what their next step was going to be. And many times they would say to me, he's not out of the woods. We don't know if he's going to make it. We don't know if he's going to walk, if he does. And so I got him into Kessler, which is the best acute one you can in Jersey.
Yeah, even up north by me, I'm very familiar
Kessler,
with the,
Well, the one in the north is actually the best of them all.
Is it really? Okay.
But, yeah, but South Jersey would be second. And there was a couple in Philly that were good, but I wanted to keep him in Jersey. I'd already been driving to Philly every day, and I work in Jersey, live in Jersey. So he ended up in Kessler for 9 weeks. They were very effective of pushing him because their PT and OT gave him several hours a day. And then he had to come home, and this was where there was they were trying to figure out, do we think he can go home?
Yeah.
And so the case manager was so good with me that I said, yeah, he's going to come home because that's where he's going to thrive. He's not going to another rehab, and I'll just set it up like a hospital. And so we ended up with 24-hour nursing for 6 months at home, 12-hour shifts. And we literally made our home a hospital, basically. And we worked with the case manager. He went to doctors on a weekly basis, 5, 6, 7 doctors, because he had to see all different, ones. And that one thing led to the other, so we just kept taking baby steps. This baby step that he had a feeding tube. He finally had that out, so that was a baby step taken. His trach, they couldn't take it out right away because he had scar tissue, so he had to go to Cooper and have 2 surgeries to get scar tissue removed. And then finally they were able to take that out. But that was a scary time too, because when you have a trach, and it's taken out, you have to watch him now for 2 weeks just to make sure his oxygen levels are staying the same.
Yeah.
So that was a scary time. But each step was one more step to getting better, getting better. And he was sitting in a shower chair, and then he was standing in the shower, and just...
You're seeing the progress over time.
Oh, yeah. You did see it. You definitely saw it. So.
When I was talking, obviously you were sitting in the room when I was talking with Eli. He was talking about how much you had pushed and helped to drive for his success and getting better and stuff like that. And something that I believe is very important is, we talk about our brotherhood and the men in the fraternity. And you had mentioned the 3 anchors, right, that I mentioned earlier. But I want to give kudos to you as well. I mean, you're his wife, so naturally, but still, regardless, I'm thankful for the women of Freemasonry that help us, that push us, because it's true, like, we need our women as much as we do our brethren. So great to see that you were there to support him and be there for him.
Well, I'm in the Eastern Star, and we were all sitting around a table one time talking, and I said, this is a perfect analogy of the brotherhood. And we were saying that we're not just friends. Like you have friends on the outside of the fraternity and the sisterhood, you do, but we are family.
Yeah.
Like it's
different. You can't know unless you're in it.
I have a million brothers now.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can't say enough about it. I know the motto is to make a good man better, and there isn't one man that I've met in this fraternity that I wouldn't call a good man, and you know, I would not have survived without them.
That's good. That's good. So we were talking, obviously we're going to have Rodney up after you to talk. You had mentioned him, Ken Thomas, Frank Jones were the guys that you said were the anchors. So how were they there? Obviously they were there to support their brother, but they were supporting you. So how did Freemasonry support you?
Well, Rodney, was a major anchor, and then Ken, as soon as he found out, he started coming to the hospital, and then Frank started coming. As I said earlier, I was limited as to who came.
Yeah.
I trusted those three that they would not bring an infection into him or, something that was going to him. I knew that on the outside they were being careful, and that I trusted that when they were there that he was in good hands. I didn't let anyone else in. It was a very secure atmosphere.
So other people were coming, but just for safety, you were kind of keeping them back?
Well, other people weren't allowed to come, no.
Okay.
Though it was really held to those three, period.
Okay.
I didn't want to open up. Well, first of all, I didn't even know. I know myself. I wouldn't want someone seeing me on a ventilator in a coma. I'm not sure that my husband would have been happy to see a bunch of people parading in his room, seeing him in a coma.
Okay.
But I knew that if Rodney and Ken and Frank were there, he would be comfortable with them. And he might have been comfortable with some of the other Masons too. However, I had to limit it because he was in ICU.
Sure.
And then when he left ICU and when he went into Kessler, he could open up more to
a little bit more,
people to come in to visit.
Sure.
Because the infections were starting. He was more, the pneumonia was starting to go away and things like that. But they were still wearing masks and being careful. But from the moment that happened, I just remember Rodney saying to me, I realized I had to take on now all the responsibility of things that he used to do. So one of them was his car. And I realized his car needed inspecting, and I had to get it done. Rodney right away stepped up and said, give me the keys. I'll take it for inspection.
Yeah.
And just anything, like Rodney came over, it's kind of funny. He came over and we had medical equipment we had to put together. Like Eli had to have a commode, he had to have a shower chair. And Rodney, right away, he's like, I'll be there, I'll put it all together. And him and I, worked on that. And the lodges came each week and they were texting me. I had texts from guys I didn't even know, just reaching out and saying, what can we do? What do you need? The Grand Lodge, they just kept me going.
That's good. Yeah, it's so important because we talk about that. For the brethren that you're watching, especially if you went through all the degrees, you know that in our oaths we talk about helping others. And to hear this story, like, Eli had talked about, I know obviously Eli through the photo committee and stuff like that, and, was aware of what happened, so we all try to step as far as we could up here doing what we do. But to hear that story, and that's why he said he wanted this to be one of the first stories we talk about. And so I was happy that, he said that you would come and talk about it, that obviously, we'd have some other brothers to talk about it. Go ahead, no, I'm sorry.
Well, one of the things that I think set the brotherhood aside was when he got to Kessler, he still needed something to push him forward. Yeah. And there were things that he was planning to do, and he wasn't able to do those things, like the grand photographer. And I knew how much he loved that, and Rodney and I talked about it, and Rodney said, I'm going to do all I can to make sure, he stays in that position too. And then we talked about he was never able to get his gold collar, so Rodney said, well, let's get the guys together and see what we can do. Kessler never had anybody come in and do anything like this, so they weren't even sure how that could happen. And they worked with us, and we managed to put it together. I have pictures if anybody would like to see them too.
Send me the pictures because I can put them in the video so we can show some of the stuff that.
And they all came in, and he was in a wheelchair with it. But I noticed, and I think Rodney did too, from the moment that happened, that they came in and honored him with the gold, and he knew he was still going to get to do that. Yeah. That pushed him forward to healing quicker, I think.
Yeah.
I really do.
When you have the purpose, it's great. And I know I eventually had heard from Most Worshipful Lon Vanderhorn that he was going to do that they were going to travel down there, and I thought that was great. And like you said, when I saw Eli at the end, like towards the end of the season, let's say, right, he was around. And so that was good. It was just great to see him back on his feet, to know that he was okay. You know, we never got too much about what was going on. I just know it was severe. I knew at one point he had the trach and stuff like that. You know, I think Roger had told us about that. You know, so we were just like, okay, well, we got to step it up. Like, you know, to be there for him as far as this responsibility goes. I'm just happy that this year he got to do it again. So Most Worshipful Grandmaster, thank you for having Eli back on staff so that he can have his year, a full year. Now that we're here, we're at the end of this road and stuff like that. If someone, like let's say as a wife, right? You know, Eli, how long have you been a Mason? 10 years. So you have 10 years with this man. And how long have you been Eastern Star?
Like I think 3 years now.
3 years now? Okay. And so 10 years with him as a Mason, right? Now you're with the Eastern Star. You mentioned something like, hey, I went now to having all these brothers and so on and so forth. Did this experience change your vision of Freemasonry, or did you always feel it was going to be this?
Well, my family was Masons. My mother's family. I always admired them, and when he got into it, I was 100% going to be behind him. I know it's something he always wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I always thought the world of them. Yes, this certainly promoted them to a whole nother level. But even from the beginning, I had a great deal of respect for them and for the Eastern Star, and believe in it fully. That's great. You know, believe in supporting him fully.
Okay.
You know.
All right. Well, Barbara, thank you for sharing on that. All right, we're going to move over to Rodney in a second. You'll see the cut. All right, thanks. All right, so I'm sitting now with Right Worshipful Rodney Butcher, who is the third part of this story for Eli, our good friend Eli here. Now, he's been a Mason for 10 years. You said when I was talking earlier to you that you've known him for 10 years.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about Right Worshipful Eli Berkowitz. Who's this man that we're talking about today?
Well, I met Eli Berkowitz at the Grand Lodge. I had just became a Master Mason, and I was representing my district in the Path Forward program that we previously had for recruitment. Mm-hmm. Eli was there. I just happened to sit next to him at the time. I didn't really know him that well. And I believe that's where everything came together. I just started talking to him. He didn't live far from where I was. He was in the next district over. And we just got to talking and seeing each other every week at Grand Lodge. Mm-hmm. For that recruitment type committee we were on. And he represented one district, I represented the other. We just got to talking, and it just grew from there without any thought involved.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a natural thing you see in Freemasonry, right? Again, Bruce Galloway, who was here, right, Worshipful Bruce Galloway,
yes,
was talking about how you're going to meet people that you would have never met before if it wasn't for Freemasonry.
No, absolutely.
And one of my mentors in the craft, Right Worshipful Elmar Turgrath from my lodge at Narm Lodge, when I walked through, he was the guy that walked me through, and I remember he said to me, he goes, "You might wake up one day and the people closest to you in your life are Freemasons," and that has come to pass. I mean, Barbara was just here talking about how, Freemasonry is like her family just got bigger. Mm-hmm. You know, she's an Eastern Star, and I totally feel that way, right? You meet brothers, and, I've seen you around, but we haven't really gotten to talking, but, we've seen each other obviously around. And that's it. You travel more, and you see more, and you get to know more brothers, and especially in your lodge. I've made some great friends in my lodge, so obviously Eli is that person.
Yeah, absolutely. He's one of many, but he's the one I still talk to. Well, I talk to everybody, but on a daily basis.
We're gonna have closer relationships with some people, right? So Eli was that, and so let's touch base. We heard from Eli about his accident from his point of view. We heard it from Barbara's point of view. When you found out that he got injured, just tell me how that went down.
At first, I thought it was maybe just a simple slip and fall. I didn't know the extent until I heard the intensive care unit, ICU. I work in a hospital
Okay.
in facilities engineering, so I know a little bit about ICU and what that means. And when
Yeah.
I heard that, I was like, okay. I didn't say anything to Barbara. I didn't say anything at all. I just, okay, well, where's he at?
Yeah.
We got, and as a couple of days progressed, and then the visitation started a little bit, I knew it wasn't as good as just a slip and fall. It wasn't that. It was a little more, and that's what it turned into. My heart dropped when I found out he was in ICU.
Yeah.
Listening to Barb talk to me, called me up, ecstatic. She just couldn't. She was just very upset, and I knew I had to comfort her in some way, any way I could, and yeah,
That's that family right there that we're talking about.
Yeah,
right?
it
That
is absolutely.
We end up loving these guys more than just a little fraternity.
Yeah.
Some people become family, and their extended family, their family becomes our family.
Yes.
Right. So obviously, from the way they've spoken about how you stepped up, you can clearly see that. So I want to move into that. Right. So we find out that Eli's been injured. Right. You talk to his wife. Right. She's mentioning about some things that you stepped up to do, like getting the car inspected and stuff like that. For anybody that might be interested in Freemasonry, right? So if anybody here that's watching this that's not a Mason, right? I want you to answer this question for them. Why do it? Why be a Mason? Why step up this way? What drove you to be that person?
It's got to be. It's in your heart. It's in your heart. It's something that you see other Freemasons do. When I first joined, I didn't know too much about it. I know a little bit from what I could read and find out. But as I got more familiar with other brother Masons, I saw what they were, how they were, and I wanted to be that, and that's what I became.
I love that. That's inspiring because I forgot what I was watching, but a guy was talking about he saw somebody do a good deed, right? And he goes, "You inspired me to want to do it." Right? And so your action to be there to help, I hope can be an inspiration for others. It's definitely for me to hear what's going on, what's happened, to hear Eli and Barbara talk about it, and to know that a brother was there to step up. We like to think that we'll be those people, but you can't know until you try, until you're there in that situation.
You're right. You don't know. You don't know what's around the next corner with Masonry. In this situation, that particular one, I saw the need. I saw. First thing out of my mouth, my words to her was, what can I do? That was the first thing. And then she'd say, I got to take care of this. I don't know what I'm going to do. I said, I'll help you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
Just being that brother that's needed, that's very important.
So you were coming around to be at the hospital, be there for Eli and stuff like that. A couple things that they mentioned that I had grabbed on was about when they were saying it was going to be difficult for him to walk and stuff like that. And I know Eli mentioned, even Barbara mentioned about you being pushing, like, no, it's going to happen. And is that something that's naturally coming to you? Are you like a kind of person that's like kind of like motivational, let's go, or was it just a fear thing, a support thing? What really had you going there? Like,
I think it was a little bit of both right there. It was inspirational to give her a peace of mind. He's going to do it.
Yeah.
Before the accident happened, I know Eli was a very strong, upstanding man. He wasn't weak at all. And I said, this can't stop him. Yeah. Just to fall, it can't. And just to be motivational, inspirational, yes.
Yeah. I think it's important we do that we support each other as men. We need that. Right. To just sometimes hear a good word. There's enough negativity, I think, out there.
There is.
And so that's one of the good things I like about Freemasonry is that some of us really want to push I think the ideal of what we say in our oaths. Like you just said, I was like, where were you first made a Mason? In my heart.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? And so that's something that we
absolutely.
do. To brothers that are out there now that might be dealing with difficult times and stuff like that, what can you say to them to help them find that place of servitude, of help, of care? Like, you obviously have it. You've experienced a brother going through difficult times. You've been there to support him, right? What can you say to another brother that doesn't know how to help?
Lend a hand. Ask if there is anything you can do. Right. Ask if you see something you think you can help out and do it. Right. See what they need. Talk to the person in need. Yeah. There's more out there than you think. Some people don't talk about it. They keep it to themselves, and you won't know. But some will. They'll let you know.
Yeah.
And if you can help them, do that. Reach out to them. It might just be a phone call. It might be a stop at the house. It might be just running into them out in general. You know, but do what you can. Offer that hand, that word to them. You know, that you'll help.
Good.
That goes a long way.
Yeah.
You know, what I've done in the past also is I make phone calls. I sit just not doing too much, and
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah, you know, I just might make a phone call. I haven't talked to you in a while, and I think that I'm not the only one that does it. That's for sure. But that helps out a lot. That helps out.
Sure. I think even in this situation that we're talking about, Eli's situation, you know, Barbara was saying that, like, you know, because of the state that he was in, she really couldn't have a lot of people in. Right. So obviously you were making sacrifices to be able to help, right? But for those that couldn't, like, guys, you heard it here first. Pick up the phone, make a phone call. Yeah. That could be, it just shows support, you know, even just, you know, emotional support. Yeah,
emotional. The other thing too is not just pick it up, answer it.
Yeah.
That's another big one right there.
Like
answer that phone because it's important.
Well, we're prideful creatures, right? And then sometimes we don't want to answer that.
Sometimes we don't, but in certain, you know, I've picked up the phone many times not knowing the number because it wasn't maybe in my Rolodex or, you know, in my list of friends on the phone or people I know. I didn't have a name under it. And it just so happens it was one. A friend that was, hey, you know, I'm broke down. You know, something. It might be anything. It could be any situation. Yeah. So for you, is this a calling in Freemasonry part of like what you did here? Did you feel like because you're a Mason, this is part of what you have to do? Or is this the kind of person you've always been? Yeah, I believe this is one of the person I've been. It's just sometimes you're just not put in the situation to be that. But when I heard it, I knew where I had to be. I knew right away where I needed to be, and that was with the moral support, the mental support for Barb, you know, and then Eli needed it too. You know, absolutely. Even though, you know, you start talking to him, he couldn't answer you back. You know,
what were those days like when he was in a coma?
Oh man, they're tough, man. It's just seeing him there, not talking to him, and he's just totally incoherent to it. You know, just totally. It was emotional. There was times where I spent more time in the bathroom.
Yeah, because you're worried. And that's general care. That's general passion and love for a friend, a brother.
Yep. The power of prayer works. I'm a firmer believer of that after this situation. His situation, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's definitely important that we are, you know, whatever deity it is that you follow, right? We always say to be a Mason, you have to have a higher power. We have to fall back to that higher power sometimes.
Yeah, you're right, exactly right, and we do. Very emotional a lot of times. Other times I went in there with a better feeling and you know, more uplifted, and I could hold my emotions back. There's times I couldn't. At all. Just seeing him in that state, you know, just making sure that, because I mean the nurses wouldn't tell me too much. I had to hear it from Barb, you know, which is what it is. But I just want to make sure he's being taken care of the right way, the proper way, you know, and everything's going fine. And just want to see that, you know, he's gonna recover. He's going to do it, you know.
It's good. It's just great to hear.
Yeah.
I've been fortunate enough to serve on staff like you.
Yes.
And definitely traveled more in this state. You know, this story I get to know now simply because I was on staff with Eli and got to hear about it. You know, he's wanted to share it, and now we have the platform. I want to thank Right Worshipful Art Campbell, whose face will appear about now. And thank you for making this happen. He doesn't want to be on the video, so I'm going to make sure he's on all of them. But this story needs to be shared, right? And so what you're saying, you're one of the people that, you know, Eli wanted to be here to speak. And so thank you again for sharing that time with us.
Yes, thank you.
All right. And so I want to move next to talk to all three of you together, and we're going to go over that. All right?
All right.
Okay, so we've had everybody get some time to speak with me. So I wanted to present some questions to all three of you together regarding what had happened. And so, Barb, you were just talking about something where you had experience where Eli was talking. Can you share us a little bit of details?
Not without crying. So he was talking to, well, I thought he was talking to maybe family that's in heaven, or, you know, somebody he knew in heaven. I just felt like, having already seen people pass this journey, I knew that I felt that was happening, even though the trauma team said, oh, maybe he's delirious, or, you know, let's give him more medication. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure he was talking to, deciding, because I believe sometimes when you're in a coma that you can hear people. I do believe that. And I also believe that sometimes you are making a decision. You're kind of between here and heaven, and you're kind of deciding, do I want to go back, or do I want to stay? Because he was going through a lot of pain and agony and suffering, and it was very difficult. Rodney will tell you that to watch him suffer, very difficult every day. And I knew that the IVs hurt him, and Eli was always terrified of shots and IVs and things like that. So I knew that that was only going to intensify, with him laying there. And this one particular day, I had to make a decision to get him to fight or to not fight, So I told him I'd be okay.
And he's okay.
Yeah.
He's
I
okay.
said,
He's here.
if you're going to fight, you're going to fight hard. Yeah. And he did. He turned around, but I really do believe he had 63 prayer chains. And in all these different churches and Masons and Eastern Stars and my healthcare community and just friends, he had 63. That was a lot. And everybody and their brother was praying for him. And I think those prayers gave him the strength he needed.
They matter.
To
Absolutely.
come back.
We say it takes a community to raise a child sometimes, but hey,
Yeah.
sometimes it takes a community to save a life.
I think he heard all of us when we were in there talking to him. And I'll tell you how I know that, because when the trauma team came in one day and was talking around his bed, which I stopped them from doing that, he had several monitors, and I could see his monitors were changing as they were going into details that he shouldn't hear. And I didn't let them talk around his bed anymore after that. But I think that he heard me and Rodney and Ken and Frank. I truly believe he did hear us.
Okay. Question for you, Rodney, if you can pass him the mic. So we're obviously aware that, he had his time in the coma. Barbra was just sharing some of that. What did you talk about? You said you were there. I know when we were just talking previously about, it's definitely an emotional moment for you. What'd you talk about with your brother? What was the conversations?
It was what lodges were doing. Okay. What degree, just normal, everyday conversation that we would have had on the telephone.
Had to keep him up to date.
Yeah, everything of the day, yeah. Just reassuring him, you're going to be all right. You're doing better. I could see it. Every day he's a little better and a little better. It was slow. Yeah. But let him know about the weather if he couldn't, just general things, the real life things that we would talk about any other time. And just kept that going, Right. And just let him know I was there, and everybody was there for him, Talk about the cards that were sent to him that were on the wall, that were taped to the room, and who sent them. I went through that before a couple times with him, and
he was on that mental vacation, so you had to,
he was on a
do
mental
the secretarial work for him.
Yes.
Yeah. Eli, now that you have a lot more detail about what had happened in your time being, in a coma. Your wife's obviously filled you in. You have a brother here and some others that have been there to support for you. What was that like coming out of that? In that, you're in darkness, right? And you came to light, as a Mason should. Knowing the support you had now.
Well, I've seen the light, and as you mentioned, when a lot of these stories were told to me, that they involved me, but I was not there to see them. I know from, between Barbra, Frank, Ken, Rodney, they told me different things. The doctors told Barb many times that he's not going to make it. And, her prayers, and, God's guidance, his hand, is what put everybody into place with it. She told me a story that she was leaving the hospital one evening, and the trauma team or one of the doctors said to her, "We don't think he's going to make it. His numbers are too bad. They're very bad." So she said to me, she went home, she got on her knees, she was crying. She prayed to Jesus, she prayed to Padre Pierre, and the next morning she walked in, and the trauma team said, "We don't understand this. His numbers are going up. They're just going up. He's coming better." And she said, we don't understand it. So she said, "I understand it. I know what happened. The real doctor took care of him." And, that's what
it's a grand architect at work, right? We got
grand architect at work.
Send up our prayers.
That's right. and he listened to her.
It
And he wasn't ready for me yet.
Yeah.
So and like I just mentioned, he guided the doctor's hands, he guided my brother's hands, he guided my wife's hands, and said, "This is what you got to do."
Faith, hope, and charity, right? We got to have that faith.
Yeah.
We got to have that hope. And the charity of brethren.
Yeah, I remember that phone call I got. This is the same that story. Yeah.
Yeah.
One day it wasn't looking good, and then the next morning, numbers came up, everything came up. I do remember that call.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I just wanted to let you know that through tragedies, you can make a decision to either bring something out of it good or to live in the negative. We all choose to bring something good out of it. And one of the things in the Masonry was he wanted to write a book to inspire others to spread it through the Masonry and Eastern Star, and also to spread it with the people that I work with in healthcare. And then for me, it led me to develop a program on any given day so that I can teach people how to navigate the healthcare system, because I was on the other end and now knew, and to help support groups with caregiver support groups. So this has led him to be more of a Mason, me more of an Eastern Star, more involved, more wanting to spread the word of the brotherhood and sisterhood, and then they can spread it further out. And that's why I think our case manager wants to become a Mason now and put a petition in, our neighbor and a few others, because I think the word has spread.
Yeah, that representation I think is so important. A lot of people, I think it's in, if I'm getting it right, in Little Falls Lodge up North Jersey by us, when you leave, there's a sign, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm probably getting it wrong, but I remember the idea of it. It says, remember that you are someone's, I think, representation of Freemasonry or something along those lines. And this is a perfect story about that, of how, we can show that, hey, we are there for each other. We do take care of each other like family. In Rodney, in your case, you were there a little bit more than others, but still, even the prayers that you're talking about, Barbara, that people are saying, they matter. That we're putting out that energy, we're keeping people in our hearts, but we're also representing our craft to others, and they can see what it is about. It's a higher path, right? We definitely, take our oaths and stuff like that, and, this is a great story that shows it happened. Rodney, to you, that you lived by that, right? And for Eli, Barbara, for both of you to show, to go through this experience together and come out on the other end, from saying that, hey, he might not make it to, he's not going to walk. And, Eli, I seen you walking around with your camera, so I know them feet still dance, they still move. So that's fantastic. And that's what we want to see. That's what we want to hear. I'm going to end up closing up here. So if you guys have any closing statements, anything you want to leave for anybody that is interested in Freemasonry, or Barbara, you can talk about the Eastern Star too, please let them know.
I just want to say one thing, and this is something very simple. We go to receptions, and a lot of times Barbara's with me at receptions. And to show you what a family is, the brothers come over to her and say to her, "Thank you for taking care of him." And, strangers don't do that. The brothers go to her specifically, and they say to her, "Thank you for taking care of him." And that means a lot,
The one thing about Eastern Star is it's unfortunate that a lot of the Eastern Star chapters are older, and we're trying to get younger people to come in. I would like to spread the word that it would be nice to see more wives of Masons become Eastern Stars, because I really feel that we're very supportive to the men, and the men are supportive to us. So it's brothers and sisters helping each other. And it really is a great organization. So
good. And Rodney, any closing statements?
I love you both. I really do. It was a journey. Masonry is it becomes a part. Masonry becomes a part of you. It really does. It is you. It's in your heart, and I guess that's all.
All right, appreciate it. We'll wrap up here. To the brethren watching, thank you again, Eli, Barbara, Rodney. Thank you for your time on this weekend.
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this.
You can find more of this material. We're going to probably have it on YouTube or on the Grand Lodge. And if you have any stories that you want to share about Freemasonry and how it's been a benefit to you and how they were there for your family, please reach out to the Grand Lodge. You can speak to your secretary to reach out to the Grand Secretary or myself. My name is Ruben Flatus. I'm Right Worshipful. And you could also speak to the guy, Right Worshipful Art Campbell. Either one of us will be happy to hear your story, and then we can share it. Take care.